gozaimasu. Oh, for the beginning of Shakespeare, all of that stuff. This is the last day of the Urban Tree Festival, and so we have been wallpapering our Instagram wall and other social media, Facebook and Twitter, with our tree huggers. The tree huggers, you wonderful people who went out and hugged a tree. Don't you feel better? I'm hoping this starts a habit, because there's research that shows that it's good for the tree too. It's definitely good for humans. You know, we all, for some reason a line from Dr. Zhivago is coming to me. We're all made from the same clay, you know. Rod Steiger, now he's kind of a bad guy, but that is true. We're all part of the same atoms and organisms, and when we connect with these other organisms who live in different ways than we do, it boosts our immune system for one thing. We learned that from the Woodland Trust. We do have a video from the Beaver Castle Flower Show where the woman from the Woodland Trust, Kieran, is talking about all of the things that going into the forest, going into nature, hugging a tree, getting up close and personal with this stuff helps you. And you know, I've said before the line that of the week a couple of weeks ago, one touch of nature makes the whole world kin. But the fact is, we're kin already, and that just brings it closer, brings it in. So we're talking about that. I have my little show and tell before Hannah comes on, but she was doing the Urban Tree Festival, a special segment yesterday on Tilia, or lime tree, which we have had her talk about here. And then I ended with, today I posted everybody's tree huggers together, and it's so great to see everybody hugging a tree. And next year we want to double and treble that. But I also added the historical ones in, and there's a reason, because today we're going to be talking about roots. And I was thinking about that. The roots of the tree are what ground us. You know, it's what gives the tree ability to grow taller, thicker, wider, wiser, bigger, more canopy, all of the things that we talked about in the London Plane Tree conversation last year for the Urban Tree Festival, which I have to tell you, I watched again, and it was my first foray into doing all this stuff. But what we did do with the end of that conversation is I asked everybody first I made everybody speak a line of Shakespeare, which tree people aren't really used to, so that was super fun. And then, because what we're trying to do here is bring the head and the heart and the body together. It's all one. That was another line of the week. We call it the Bard's Brain Body Boost, and probably I don't push that enough, because yeah, I'm not so great at that, but anyway, Bard's Brain Body Boost. I'm pushing it at you now to understand, you know, the connection between all things, and that's one of the things that Shakespeare is great at. And anyway, so going back to roots, the things that sparked you when you were a kid, the things that you remember, the things that for some reason stood out and made an indelible impression, like a tree ring, on your consciousness. And so I remember I was talking to the head arborist at the National Arboretum in Washington a couple weeks ago, and she said in 5th grade, when she walked into the class one day, they had planted all these lima beans, and the lima beans had these little tendrils coming down, and she was entranced, and that was it. Her seed was planted. And for me, I saw a traveling troupe of actors came through to St. Martha's when I was in 3rd grade, and it was 12th night, and I was entranced. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important to do theater in schools, why it's so important to do Shakespeare in schools. But think about things that in your youth that made you stand up, like a little spark was ignited, like a little match was lit. The other theory, or maybe it's a hypothesis, I'm not sure, that I know, is that a story that you heard or read, especially a fairy tale, an antique tale, the one that you remember specifically or especially, tells you something about your journey in this life. You know, mine was the Wild Swans, and boy, does that make sense. for better or worse. So anyway, so those are our roots. So we're talking, and Shakespeare uses root a lot on, mostly as a metaphor, but it's important to think about those things. As we're talking about trees and the growing up, where does the growing come from? And so, the line of the week is, thy truth and thy integrity is rooted in us, thy friend. Give me thy hand, stand up. That is Henry VIII, and it actually makes me want to well up just saying it, so I don't know if I should say it again. Thy truth and thy integrity is rooted in us, thy friend. Give me thy hand, stand up. Stand up, because your roots are strong. So, now we will bring on Hannah. Good morning, Ohio, Hannah. Oh my God! And I also forgot, no plug to Hannah, at the farmer's market, I got a huge bunch of chamomile and a little rhubarb, both of which we have done shows on. And Hannah very cleverly told us that if you are unsure, then you cut the thing in half, and what did you say about it? It's raised. That's how you tell if it's a chamomile.
It's kind of got a little arch.
A little arch, a little cone, a little, I don't know, bump. That's not very poetic. Anyway, the pregnant chamomile. And I also got, I don't know if you have had these yet, lilies of the valley, which just small vine, and you cannot get them in New York City, but somebody brought them from the country and was selling them at the farmer's market. So that was just amazing.
They're definitely one to enjoy the aroma of, but definitely don't eat because they're highly poisonous.
I don't have my crush and sniff today, which I always do. Say crush and sniff and breathe to get the body going and cleanse the organs. But you know what? You can use beautiful flowers too. It doesn't always have to be rosemary or mint or thyme or whatever. It can be some fantastic smelling flower, because it is probably tranquil and calming, the sweet smells. It's not necessarily invigorating, but it does definitely calm the body. So Hannah and I had a little bit of a miscommunication, because I thought we were going to talk about roots of the tree, but she says that there's not really much medicinal aspects to, so that's good. So you won't be digging up a tree's roots. So we've actually just saved a bunch of trees there. But we are going to talk about roots in Shakespeare, and Hannah, take it away.
So I think we've spoken about these before. I'm pretty sure we have anyway. But the first one that popped to mind when I was flipping through the book and thinking, haha, which roots have we got, was Burdock. Yeah. So Burdock, Arctium Lappa.
That's on the back of the book. This is not a great copy of the book, but it's such a gorgeous illustration. It's one of the ones that made me fall in love with them. But
they're just stunning. I mean, when they start to grow, they start to grow quite small. But if you leave them growing and they grow year after year after year, they can get really big. And I think one of the biggest ones I've seen growing was on a piece of common land not too far from here. It was easily kind of up to there on me, and about 2 meters wide, huge.
Wow.
But the flowers are they're just incredibly complex, because they're these thistly flowers with these little sort of purpley bits off the top. And then you can have loads of fun with them in the autumn, and kind of, when they go to seed, and you can, throw them at people so they stick.
Well, but you can throw. I mean, Shakespeare talks about the burrs that stick, and that's burdock. And honestly, when we were doing Chelsea Flower Show, we had the lower part of the booth lined with them, and they kept getting stuck, and I had a tulle skirt at one time. They're still in the skirt, because you cannot get them out. Also, do not wear tulle. Do not wear tulle around burdock. I mean, that's just a fashion rule. Oh, you know what tutus are made of? That kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go your tutu in a burdock field.
Wouldn't have put that one down.
Like a random piece of wisdom.
But I mean, burdock, it's in terms of its medicinal use, the seed can be used, but it's mainly the root that's always being used. And in Japan, it's the roots used as a food, which I tried a little bit of when we had a student from Japan that was studying with us, and she brought in some burdock root, and it was really quite nice. It was quite sweet, actually. It was lovely. Yeah. But medicinally, it's used for conditions that are really dry, so things like eczema and psoriasis and kind of sort of very sort of dry, stiff joints, so rheumatic joints and rheumatoid arthritis, and more so sort of osteoarthritis. So it's burdock is quite oily. So by taking burdock medicinally, in cases where something's quite dry, you kind of balance out that dryness with the oiliness. But it's quite pushy, so you have to be really careful with it. So it's something.
Pushy? What do you mean by pushy?
In terms of its action on the body. So usually when we use it as herbalists, we usually start off at sort of quite lowish doses. If you go in, straight away with big high doses, it can just be a bit too much for people sometimes, and can make something. Sometimes things do get worse before they get better, but it can sometimes make things really get worse before they get better. But my word, is it effective? It's so good, and to be honest, it tastes pretty good as well. And it's all the medicinal roots that we use, like burdock. They're all grounding, like you were saying. There's an element that you really get from the nature of the root, of that lovely groundedness, really.
Oh, that's so lovely. I've had it in Chinese food, but there's so much sauce on it that it's really hard to pick out the individual flavor. So how would one take it medicinally, ideally?
So, I mean, I would say that you should be able to buy the dried roots from places that sell medicinal dried plants, or the dried tincture. If people have, wild burdock growing in their gardens, you could dig up a little bit of the roots and process it yourself and clean it off with a brush and dry it and then chop it up. But it's usually with roots, it's easier to purchase them unless you've got something, in your own garden that you can use, because you don't want to be digging up roots out in the wild.
Okay, well, there's those of us who live in apartment buildings and don't have that, but I was thinking I do have a little, like a window box down in DC that I could maybe persuade people to let me put some burdock in. Would that work, do you think? Do you think it might survive in a window box?
I don't think so. It goes deep.
Yeah.
So things like burdock root and angelica root and things like that, they're things really that they like space to kind of spread their feet a little bit. And if they can't spread their feet, they're not very happy.
That's right. Well, there you go. They need to spread their roots. So we did do angelica as well, and we talked about that because that's another root, because it's a name in Romeo and Juliet, but also some schools of thought believe that it was a way to inject the plant into the play or into the scene. It's in a banqueting scene. It's talking about getting the feast ready, so it's possible. Anyway, now you have started a new venture, and we didn't get to talk about that last time. What is Edge of the Hedge?
Oh, okay. So Edge of the Hedge is something that's been brewing for about a year. I'm someone who has a lot of ideas, and not all of them get off the ground because there aren't enough hours in the day. But Edge of the Hedge is
I totally feel you on that, sister. Oh my God. And it was like, you have too many ideas. So I can't wait to meet. We can just talk all night and day about the ideas.
Yeah, totally. But Edge of the Hedge is essentially going to be a podcast. And it's going to be a podcast all about connecting with nature using the senses. basically, because it's something, I mean, you know, particularly in the last year, we've spent so much time on screens, looking at screens and, you know, using that really, really visual sense that, you know, obviously is a vital, important sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, how much are we using our sense of touch and our sense of smell and our sense of hearing? And, you know, and then our kind of heartfelt perception as well. So it's going to be about connecting with nature on a very, very personal basis, but essentially encouraging people to experiment, really.
I love experiments. You know, I love experiments. I was thinking about this just the other day, because we can do sight and hearing on these kinds of platforms, but is taste going to be part of it, do you think?
For some of it, yeah. It's I'm going to try and kind of balance the senses, but it's going to be quite seasonal. So there's, you know, come December time, there's not going to be a great deal, but yeah, it should be fun. So
the podcast, and you're also taking people through hedges and things like that.
So I mean, I've always taken people out on herb walks. That's always been a big part of what I do. And here in Lincolnshire, we've got the annual North Kesteven Walking Festival, which is a big walking festival for this part of the county. And there's all sorts of lovely walks, but I've always done herb walks as part of it, and I've always done them privately anyway. So that's kind of introducing people to the you know, to the medicinal plant life that lives around them, basically, which we couldn't do last year, but hopefully we can this year.
But that's sort of what we've been talking about here as well, and then also connecting it to Shakespeare, to ancient wisdom and literature and poetry and history, because I did see on your Instagram page you talked about the verges, mowing of the verges. I'm trying to think what we call verges here, because we don't call them verges. I don't know, what do we call them? But it's just kind of like areas of the road and lay-bys and sort of land that people don't care about. And they grow a lot of plants. And one of the things when I was over there launching Botanical Shakespeare in 2017, there was all these plants on the verges that are on the endangered red list now, because people are mowing them down or getting rid of them because weeds aren't important and all these things. And everything is here for a reason. And people, I think it'd be great to have people more aware of what every little thing does. Every little thing. Anyway, so great luck with that. That'll be fun. And remember your line of the week. Thy truth and thy integrity are rooted in us, thy friend. Give me thy hand. Stand up. Henry Yeh. All right. It has been a pleasure. Have a lovely time off. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye.